Hello, everyone. I'm Shelley Emling, the editor of the Girlfriend newsletter from AARP. I'm also the moderator of the Girlfriend Book Club, which is a closed Facebook group that's been around for about 3 years. We have about 55,000 members, and after a rigorous voting process, they chose the book Mad Honey as our pick for this month, and I'm so glad they did. I devoured this in 3 days, a Friday through a Sunday. It's so good. So we're so pleased that the two authors of Mad Honey are here with us to discuss their bestseller. And first, I'd like to bring on Jodi Picoult, who is the author of, I think 28 books, if I'm not mistaken, including Wish You Were Here. Is it 28 books that you're the author of now?
I don't know. I stopped counting, to be honest.
Wow, that's a lot of books then. Okay. And also with us today is Jennifer Finney Boylan, who goes by Jenny, and she's the co-author, and she's written more than 12 novels, I believe. Is that right? Do I have that right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay. So welcome to both of you. As I said, everybody's going to want to see this interview. AARP has nearly 40 million members. The book club has 55,000. And so everybody's so excited about this. So first of all, I know you've been asked this 1,000 times, and I apologize, but I know that Jenny, you thought of this in a dream, thought of writing a book with Jodi. So can you just tell us a little bit about how that came about, and also, like, how much did you dream? Was it just like, oh, one day I'm going to write a book with Jodi, or was that this would be the plot?
Well, I don't mind telling the story again, because every time I tell it, I can't believe that this is real. And yet, here we go. May 2017, I'm in my apartment in New York City, where I teach at Barnard in the spring each year. And I woke up from a dream. What was the dream? The dream was I was co-authoring a book with Jodi Picoult, who it's worth pointing out, I had not met Jodi. I didn't know her. I mean, we followed each other on Twitter. That was the extent of our intimate relationship. And there is such a thing as author Twitter. So you follow the authors that you love. And I'd always, I'd loved Jodi's books since, I think The Pact was the first one I read, which is, 15, 20 years ago. So going back a ways. Anyway, big fan. First time, long time fan, first time author. So the dream was that there were these two voices. In the dream, Jodi was the author of one voice, I was the author of the other. And the dream was that there was a young girl, a young woman who had been murdered. That was one voice. And the other voice was the voice of her boyfriend's mother, and the boyfriend was accused of the crime. So that was mostly the extent of the dream. I woke up, I got some coffee, I went back to bed, and I was just kind of a little surprised, because I don't usually dream stuff like that. My dreams are usually things like, I'm making spaghetti on the moon or something.
Do you typically remember your dreams? I was going to ask.
Yeah, well, it was weird. It was very specific. So I tweeted out, I just dreamed I was co-authoring a book with Jodi Picoult! ! LOL. This is I think it's just like 8:30 in the morning or something. And Jodi happened to be online at that moment and saw the tweet and sent me a message, and she said, "What was this book about?" And I told her what I just told you, and she wrote back, "OMG, let's do it." And wow is right. I mean, literally, it's just kind of worth hanging on to that moment. Like, OMG, let's do it. I mean, there were a lot more steps we had to go through before we were really actually going to write this book. But her first reaction was generosity and enthusiasm and interest, which was pretty freaky to me anyway. So that's the story.
So Jodi, what appealed to you about this idea?
Well, the more that we started to sort of unpack what this was going to be about, this was a book about how the past informs the present, and whether we ever get to discard pieces of our past and who we used to be in the pursuit of becoming who we need to be. And I knew it was going to be about that across all different kinds of platforms. And one of the things we wanted to look at as part of identity was also gender identity. And that was something that I'd wanted to write about for a long time. But it's also a world that I haven't personally lived. I'm a cisgender woman, which means that I was born into a female body and I stayed in a female body. And I knew that Jenny had had a very different life experience in terms of what it means to be a woman in this country. And I really thought that coming together, we would be able to create narratives in a way that hadn't really been done before. And maybe, open some hearts and minds along the way. So it was like the perfect partnership at the perfect moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this book is not only, or even primarily about transgender issues. And there is a trans element in it. We should mention. And as a transgender woman, my own self, I thought, well, I bet I could probably handle that part of it. But
there's a lot more to it. Yeah.
I mean, so this is it's a murder mystery. It's a courtroom drama. It's in some ways the most important thing. It's a love story.
Right.
And the girl who dies, and that's really not a spoiler. We learn that she dies at the end of chapter 1.
Yeah.
She is head over heels in love with Asher. She and Lily is her name. Lily and her mom, who's a forest ranger, have moved to this little town in New Hampshire, where they're both starting over in many ways, and she is head over heels in love with Asher, her boyfriend, who is a hockey player and kind of this. He's an interesting young man, and I hope that people who read this book fall in love with him because he's kind of he's kind of like a dreamboat, but he's also complicated. Yeah, and he bears the shadow of his mother's experience. His mother fled an abused marriage. Asher and his mom, Olivia, are also starting over. Olivia is a beekeeper. I'm sure that Jodi is going to be happy to tell you all about beekeeping in just a second. But so you've got these three main characters who are all starting over. But at the end of chapter 1, we learn that Lily is dead and Asher is being questioned by the police.
So I know that I believe you wrote from the Olivia portion of it, Jodi, I think. And Jenny, you were focused on Lily. I'm curious who wrote Asher. Did you do that together?
Well, no, we had to share Asher, honestly. And that was kind of funny. And I should also say that, yes, I mostly wrote Olivia. And yes, Jenny mostly wrote Lily. But we decided very early on that we were going to each swap one of each other's chapters and not tell the readers. We wanted it to allow us to inhabit each other's characters, so we really knew them. But we also thought it would be a very fun game for readers.
Yeah, in some ways, it's like a creative writing workshop game. Like,
but there were times when I wrote a lot of Asher because most of my chapters, the Olivia chapters, go forward in time in our present day. The Lily chapters go in reverse. So you're learning about Lily's experience with Asher, but. There were times where Jenny would put something in one of her chapters about Asher, and I'd be like, "He would never do that. You can't make him do that." I was
but it was
protective of him.
But it was she was very protective of Asher. We both really loved him, but he was more Jodi's character, just because Olivia, who is Jodi's main voice, is his mom.
Yeah,
and. It is true that I came up with some kind of naughty things for him to do, which Jodi would come back and say, no, don't do that to my boy.
Yeah, it was too much.
Was there? So how long did it take you to do this book?
I feel like we wrote, I think the hardest part, the longest part, came in structuring and organizing the book.
Right.
Partly because Jenny and I are very different writers, and that was a whole learning experience. I am a plotter. I literally was late to this interview because my head was in the plot of a different book. And Jenny doesn't really, in the past, had not really created outlines to work from. But there was no way that we couldn't do that for this book. I mean, when you're writing a courtroom drama and a murder mystery, you can't get to the end and go, I don't know who did it. You actually have to have a plan. So, and plus, because it was a very complicated structure, it was very easy to convince Jenny that we kind of had to do it my way or the highway. And so,
Jodi always thought it was very easy to convince me of doing everything her way.
Right. So honestly, once we started to form that outline, which probably took a good month on its own, writing from that was pretty simple. And it was a matter of just, when Jenny would send me a chapter, I would basically read it and go, oh God, it's so good. And now I had to do something equally as good and send it back, which I really think is that's an interesting thing to actually talk about for a second. I think there is this bias right now in the reading community that if a book is co-authored, it can't possibly be as good. And it must mean that the author did none of the work. And Jenny, you can argue with me, but I would say we actually had to work twice as hard. Because not only were we writing our chapters, but we would heavily edit each other's chapters to the point where it's very hard for me to remember what I wrote and what Jenny wrote. And the comment that we've received most often about this book is that it feels absolally seamless.
It does feel absolutely seamless.
Yeah, that was important for us. I mean, it's funny because I think we have very different voices in our own novels. If you pick up a book that was not co-authored by me or by Jodi, it's not a big mystery who wrote what, but there was a way in which Jodi was definitely Boylanized a little bit, and I was certainly Picoult. So we really met in the middle a lot of the time. But again, the hardest part was getting the kind of the Bible of the book, especially since, as Jodi has already said, the Lily part, mostly my part, goes backwards in time. And that was just really freaky. I'd never written a book that way. I begged Jodi, don't make me do it. And Jodi said, sorry, I did that once in another book of mine, and I'm never doing that again. But it's kind of I kind of resisted that. Jodi proposed that.
Yes, I was
like, oh no. But what happens is you have these two initial chapters, Lily's chapter and Olivia's, that both take place on the day of the murder. And so, of course, Lily's chapters are going to have to go backwards in time because there's no more future for our girl. I was
going to ask you, what was the hardest chapter or scene or character to tackle, to write about? But maybe this is it, going back in time.
Well, Jodi, you should say yours first.
I would say the hardest one were really it was I can't talk about this without giving away a major twist. So for me,
okay, because people
they've read most of it. Most of the people have read it at this point.
Yeah.
Well, so if you know what I'm talking about, the biggest twist in this book happens halfway through it. And so
there's a reveal. A reveal. Yeah. I think they call that.
And the hardest part was being able to write the first 5 or 6 chapters without tipping our hat to that. That was really difficult.
Not giving away the reveal.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not what I thought you were going to say.
Oh, what did you think I was going to say?
Well, so Asher is arrested.
Yeah.
This is a little bit more of a spoiler, but Asher does wind up in jail, and some bad shit happens to him in jail. And
that was no problem to write.
Really? Oh, it broke my heart. It's like, oh, Asher, our boy is getting pummeled,
he got I remember that scene.
I hated that. I mean, for me, I'll give you my answer to this. For me, the hardest chapter to write was the one that appears the last Lily chapter in the book, which is the first one that appears, which is the first in chronology. If you're still with me, so because the chapters go backwards, so the very last chapter that I wrote was the one that happens first in the timeline in the present, which is when she and her mother arrive in town for a new start, and she's so full of hope and
Yeah.
she's so. I mean, the thing that Lily's story is really sad. For most of the book, though, I think it's, you know, you really fall in love with her. She has this fierce spirit. She's so curious. She's like a sponge. She wants to know about the world. She's funny. I mean, I would just love to hang out with Lily, which is one of the nice things about writing the book, because I did get to hang out with Lily. But
Well,
you know, at the end, some of the last things she says are just kind of heartbreaking,
right.
because they're so full of hope, and we as the reader and me as the writer knew what was going to happen to her. So that was that. I'll confess, I very rarely shed tears while I'm actually writing. I laugh a lot while I'm writing.
Yeah.
Kind of wicked way, like, oh, they're gonna love this. But when I wrote that last Lily scene, it was just, I just kind of had to like be alone for a little bit, because
right.
it really
was like losing her all over again.
Right.
I remember getting that scene in to read, and it was literally like watching her die in front of you again.
Yeah. So I love the character Elizabeth too. Was that yours, Jenny?
Well, it's an Olivia chapter.
Oh,
so
Jodi, okay.
Well, she appears in an
that's right. Olivia meets her and talks and questions her and talks to her. Yes.
Whoever wrote that chapter, I'm sure, knew a lot about transgender experience. Because to the extent that there is this trans element in the book,
right.
we're at this point in, I think, the national conversation in which there's this one group of people who are like very advanced in terms of how they think about gender and transgender stuff and non-binary stuff.
Right.
And then I think there's the rest of the country, which is maybe, I don't even know what, 80% of the country. I mean, there's some people who are just kind of have their minds closed, and they don't want to know about anybody being anything other than what they think of as normal and traditional. But if there's a huge group of people in the middle who don't know what this trans thing is all about, and they also don't know how to learn more because they don't have the language, because it feels like they have to walk on eggshells, because the whole business seems frightening and freaky, and also something that now kind of the moment to learn about what this is about has somehow passed. Particularly for people my age, people who are of retirement age and above, for whom this was just not a thing when we were younger. So how do we learn now? Well, the character of Elizabeth is in the book. Excuse me. The character of Elizabeth is essentially in the book to guide the reader, and to kind of provide a little, not just Trans 101, but to kind of see someone's lived experience and to understand, so that's what this is all about. So that's what Elizabeth is about. Elizabeth is there, essentially to take your hand and to walk you through. And I hope that especially that the stuff with Elizabeth enables people to start to have conversations and to allow a little light bulb to go on in a place that was dark before.
Right.
I think it's really important to say that we're in a place right now where a lot of the information about trans issues and about gender are coming from people who are perhaps not the best suited to give us that information.
Right.
There's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of politicizing about being trans. There's a lot of flat out wrong and flat out lies being told about hormone therapy, about children transitioning, things that you're hearing about in the news sometimes that are inaccurate. And the best way to learn the truth is to know someone trans.
Right.
Right? Which, if you're lucky enough to know someone trans, then you've probably heard their story and you're friends with them.
Right.
And that takes some of the mystery and the fear away from it. If you don't know someone trans, the second best way to get to know what that life is like is to read a story about that.
Right.
And that is what we hope Elizabeth and all the other conversations that happen in the book can do.
Did you, I think I read somewhere that you anticipated getting some hate mail as a result of this book. Did that
Yeah.
did that really happen, or did
Well, I
that
mean,
not transpire? It
I've
did?
got them, yeah. And I mean, the hate mail that I've been getting, which I haven't shared with you actually,
Yeah, I know, and I appreciate that. And
it's mostly,
I don't send mine to you either. So
oh, that's nice.
this is why we're friends. We do
Yeah,
each other the
we
gift.
protect each
not
other. It's
forwarding hate.
mostly people who are like, you lied to me. You didn't tell me that there was a trans person in this book on the flyleaf. And so I bought it and I'm burning it now. I didn't want to read about this. This is a woke novel, things like that. That's the kind of stuff that I get. And because I'm probably an idiot, I write everybody back. And I do it. I'm very kind. I lead with kindness and I try really hard to unpack what they're saying.
Right.
And, to explain, well, could there be a reason why we might not have put that on the jacket? Could it have to have done with the rest? Maybe it had to do with the mystery, with the rest of the
Yeah.
story, and is it my problem that there's a character like this in the book, or is it your problem that for some reason you weren't able to wrap your head around that person?
Yeah.
So it's a lot of that, and that's unfortunate. That's really unfortunate, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying about misinformation,
Right.
about people who are kind of stuck in their silos, hearing around them the words that they expect to hear and that reinforce the story in their mind. This book is meant to break through that, but
Yeah.
there are some people who aren't ready for that yet.
Right.
I,
Well, I'm
I
sorry. I thought you might say that no, you've gotten nothing but
oh
fan
no,
pretty
no.
much.
I mean, look, the ratio of fan letters to hate mail is way more people who have said this is amazing. I did send you one last night. I sent you a tweet last night. Did you see that? It was someone who said it was something from the author's note, and I said something about how unfortunately there seemed to be one of the issues right now is that there are a lot of women who are tearing other women down, because we do have cisgender women.
Oh yeah, right. Yes, you did send that.
Basically, they are denying the existence of trans women as women. And someone tweeted last night and said, you said that your book basically was hoping to change that, and I was one of those women, and you changed my mind.
Well,
Wow.
that's the great thing. That's the great thing the stories can do, and
Yeah.
stories can open hearts. And I hope when people, if people are kind enough to read our book, I hope that they will agree with me that this is not a woke novel particularly. This is, there's nothing radical about kindness. There's nothing radical about being generous and curious about other people's experience of being human. There's nothing radical about love. Although actually when I say that and I think, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is nothing more radical than love. And if that's true, I don't want people to be more radical politically, but I want them to be more radical in their lives. If being radical means understanding that there are things that we don't know about, that even in our 50s and 60s and 70s, we can still learn about and change the way we see the world. And this is not a book that is trying to mess with people's heads. It's a book that's simply asking, how is there anything more simple and more complex than loving another human being?
Right. And I know the book is also about keeping a part of yourself hidden from somebody, even somebody you love. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to ask, I mean, do you think most people do keep something hidden from?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We were on the road forever. We were promoting this book, and we would ask audiences that, and we would say, have you had a secret that you did not want to tell someone because you were afraid of the way it would change your relationship or it would make them look at you? And everyone in the audience is like, and we were like, yeah, you're all thinking of something different right now.
Yeah.
But everyone has had that moment. And I think that's another really important thing. This book is about the things we have in common rather than the things that separate us, because there are things that we have in common. And so you can look at the idea of whether or not the past informs who you are in the present. And you can look at that through the lens of a trans person's journey.
Right.
Or you can look at it through the lens of Olivia, who was an abused wife. She was in a terrible relationship and she had to reinvent herself and she had to get herself safe with her son. Well, does she have to, does she always now, is she always going to be a woman with an asterisk?
Hmm.
Is she always going to be a woman who had something, was at one point in an abusive relationship? If you are a woman with an asterisk, do you have to keep that little asterisk when you're trans? At what point do you just get to be a woman?
Yeah.
Right?
Right. So I just have to ask, I just have about 5 more minutes here. The beekeeping part. I don't know anything about beekeeping. I can't imagine how much effort it would take to learn about beekeeping. So, and I know you do, I think you have a home in New Hampshire, Jodi. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep. Take it away, Jodi Picoult.
So have you started beekeeping as a hobby, or did it
No,
not?
my husband won't let me. Um, to be fair, I'd be a terrible beekeeper because what they really need is stability and they need to be looked after weekly. And I'm just not here enough to honestly do it. My poor husband wouldn't. He does not want to do that. It's worth saying that when I was doing the research for this, it was the middle of the pandemic, and
Right.
I had not left my house except to go beekeeping in a field from 6 feet away with a beekeeper with a mask on under my beekeeping helmet,
Wow.
and I did it every weekend. I would go out and we would check his hives. And, most people know that girls kind of run the bee world, that there's a queen bee. What
Right.
they don't always know is that if you are a functioning working bee in a hive, you are female. You might be a worker bee, you might be a nurse bee, you might be a foraging bee. All of those bees are female bees.
Right.
There are male bees, they're called drones, and they do absolutely nothing. They just deplete resources. But for one very important day in their lives, the day that the queen bee takes her maiden flight, they all race out of the hive and they follow her into the sky. And like the 6 or 7 guys who get there the furthest and the fastest get to mate with her.
Right.
And at the moment they mate, you can hear their genitals snap off and they fall to their deaths. But they wind up at the end of that little orgy with the queen having all the fertilized eggs she needs for the rest of her life. Very important because her only job is to make more bees, right?
Right.
So the interesting thing that I did not know before I wrote this book was that when queen bees are laying eggs, and a fertilized egg would make a female bee and an unfertilized egg would make a drone bee. But there are times when the queen is getting a little old or sick that the nurse bees decide it's time for a new queen. And so they decide to take one of the eggs that is laid and they turn it into a queen bee by feeding it something called only royal jelly. And if you feed a fertilized egg only royal jelly, then that female bee, which would have been like a worker or a forager, instead becomes a queen bee. But if you feed an unfertilized egg royal jelly, that egg, which would have been a male bee, a drone, turns into a queen bee.
Wow. You've retained a lot of knowledge. That's pretty amazing. You
Yeah.
didn't forget what you learned.
No, it's so cool, right? I mean, what are the
And
odds?
it makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I've got, oh, go.
I was just gonna say, right. The other thing that that I think is worth talking about is Mad Honey itself.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I'd never
Yeah.
heard of Mad Honey until I
Neither had I, but
got
it
to
is
that point in the book. Yeah.
yeah. So Mad Honey is, when you go to the farmer's market and you buy wildflower honey or you buy lavender honey, that is based on where those bees are foraging their pollen and nectar from.
Right.
And it's mostly lavender or mostly wildflowers. Well, in an area of Nepal, when bees go to mountain laurel or rhododendron, they create something called mad honey, which is basically honey that tastes and looks like honey, but can make you quite sick. It can
Right.
give you fevers, chills. It can stop your heart. It can cause death in some cases. In fact, it was used as biological warfare in ancient times. They used to leave vats of this stuff out, and the approaching armies would eat the honey because they were always hungry, and they get super sick, and the home army would just go kill them all. And I just love that metaphor, the idea that something that seems sweet actually has the power to
Right.
kill you.
Yeah. Great title for the book. Really, really. So I've got three.
Actually, there was a while when we were messing around with the title "Smoke and Honey" because when you approach a hive, you use a smoker to kind of the smoke kind of slows the bees down and kind of puts them in this trance, so you can go and work the hive.
Right.
And I like the idea of smoke and honey because I thought, like, well, it's it's two things. It's something sweet and something kind of dangerous and deadly. And I also thought, it's like, well, here's two authors, one of whom is fiery and one of whom is sweet. And I'll let you figure out who is who.
Which is which?
Yeah.
So I've got three other questions, really quick ones though. First, since this is, tens of thousands of members of the book club want to know, is there a book that you're reading right now that you would recommend to them to read? Is there an author you're just discovered, or is there just or something on your nightstand that you can recommend to the audience, to read next?
What are you reading, Jodi?
I'm right now. I am reading transcripts about Elizabethan England. That's all I'm reading, which I recommend to absolutely nobody. I'm trying to think of what I last read that I really loved.
You like Celeste's book, right?
Yeah, I was going to say Celeste's book because I was talking to her the other day. She came out the same week that we did, and it's called Celeste. Actually, let's plug that, because there actually was recently a bill introduced in Congress that was against China. And what's very interesting about Celeste's book is that it envisions a future in which people who are descended from China and live in America become threats to society. So, it's kind of always interesting when you write fiction and it starts coming true.
And I just finished reading it, and I'm blanking on the title.
Yeah.
What?
Our Missing Hearts.
Our Missing Hearts, of course.
Okay.
And I'll put in a plug. I'm about a third of the way into Andrew Sean Greer's Less is Lost. And so Andy Greer won the Pulitzer Prize 4 years ago, I think, for a novel called Less. It's the protagonist is Arthur Less, and that book rightly won the Pulitzer because it's funny, it's real, it's smart, but it's just his prose is really, really interesting. It's both incredibly intelligent, but also very accessible and smart and sweetly funny at the same time. So this is the sequel, Less is Lost, and I just started that last night.
And what are you working on next? When it comes to your own writing, Jodi, obviously you're in the midst. Of
you might as well come clean, Jodi.
I'm drowning in it. I am writing about gender discrimination in publishing and theater, and I am doing it by writing a book that will convince you with proof that Shakespeare did not actually write all of his plays, but a woman named Amelia Bassano might have.
Now that's an original idea. That's good.
Yeah, let's hope I can make it all work.
My next book is less clearly defined, and I don't have a nice handle for it, but I'm trying to write about. So I came out as trans 25 years ago, and everybody was generally very nice to me because nobody had heard of it before. And so I'm trying to write about the last 25 years in the kind of the gender revolution, but I'm also trying to very clearly write about the difference between maleness and femaleness. And my life as a woman for the last 25 years has been different in almost every way than my life as a man. So Jodi, I have a new title. What do you think? She Said, She Said.
That's good.
I like it.
You don't like it as I had my 2003 memoir was called She's Not There, and Jodi was saying, call it He's Not There, this new book. You like He's Not There better than She Said, She Said?
I still do.
You do? I thought you would. Okay. Just
sorry.
So the final question.
I just thought of it. I thought of it the other day. I thought that's kind of interesting.
The final question is just about friendship and what I can tell you two are obviously very close friends, but just in general in your life, what do you do when you're not reading and writing, taking care of your family? What do you like to do for fun with your friends?
I go every morning. I either swim a mile by myself, or I go for a hike with a group of friends, no matter what the weather's like, and it's usually quite cold in New Hampshire.
Right.
And, we hike up this kind of like very steep hill into the mountains, and I have a pack of 3 friends that come with me. Often I'm on the hills trying to work out a plot, like running it by them. What do you think of that? What do you think of that? And honestly, I'm so grateful for the female friendships that I have, because they are the sounding boards of my life, right? Yeah.
How about
Jodi,
you?
I'm gonna say that's really true, because as you just saw with the title, that
That's
Jodi's got really good instincts, and has helped me not only with my next book, but with a couple of other ideas that I've been trying to think about. One of which is a novel about Amelia Earhart, which I'm still trying to convince Jodi to make our next book for 2027, whenever that comes out. But don't hold your
Yes,
breath.
you should work together again.
and
To answer your
that, we got a great book out of this collaboration, but we got an even better friendship.
That's
well,
amazing.
That's
amazing.
well said. This is, to answer your question before, that's rather the place we should end right there. But to answer your question, what do I do in my spare time? Oh, nothing. Nothing comes to mind.
She makes pizzas, lots of pizzas.
I like to bake. I'm a baker. I've always loved. I like pizzas. I like bread. I like sourdough. I like soda bread. Really anything that involves flour and yeast. And what I do is I like to make that, and then I like to serve it to the people that I love. And
well, that's nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So
all right.
So baking is. I don't like make sweet things. I don't make cookies. Oh, you know what's funny? Did the recipes at the back of?
Well, I was going to ask about the recipes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Are those...
the book has recipes at the end, and now that many people have read the book, at least I'm starting to get fan mail about the recipes.
Right.
That at the very back of the book contains a dozen recipes that contain things that contain honey.
Which is a great surprise at the end, because I didn't know that was going to happen. And then you see these recipes.
And there's a little, I think they call it an Easter egg. There's one last little twitch of the dramatic tale. Somewhere, buried in the recipes at the very end. So it's not just recipes. The story goes on.
Now I have to go back and look at the.
Well, read the very last one.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you guys, to both of you, so much. Mad Honey. This was our book pick for January. I'm so pleased, Jodi and Jenny, that you could both be with us. Good luck. I hope you write another book together again, because this was magical. And I just want to thank you guys. And while you're still here, just a reminder to the book club audience that next month, the author of The Corey Girls is joining us on February 21st. And then in March, Barbara Kingsolver is joining us with to talk about her book, our March book club pick, Demon Copperhead.
That's my next one.
I can't wait to read that one. So mark your calendars with those dates, February 21st, March 21st. Thank you, Jodi and Jenny. And for those of you in the book club, stay online, because I'll be posting conversation starters just like I always do, so that you guys can talk about your thoughts about Mad Honey. So thanks. Good night, everybody. Thanks, Jodi and Jenny.
Bye-bye.
Great to meet you.